In this episode, we discuss how to build a solid foundation for treasury transformation, building a treasury function for a multi-billion company from the ground up, the importance of cultural change in driving successful treasury transformation, how to implement and enforce treasury governance and policies for long-term success, and of course, much more. Welcome to the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast. And in today's episode, we welcome Séverine Le Blévennec on how to build a treasury function for a multi-billion company from scratch. Séverine, a seasoned treasury leader with 25 years of experience, is the Global Head of Treasury at Aliaxis. Aliaxis is a global leader in advanced piping systems, providing innovative solutions for water and energy management across 40 countries on 5 continents. Séverine is a bit special to me. She is one of the first person I worked with during my consulting career as a client. So we've worked together for more than 2 years, and I'm really glad that we could finally have her on the Corporate Treasury 101. She's played a pivotal role in my training and my, let's say, what I'm doing in Corporate Treasury now. So very grateful to Séverine and very happy to have her on the show. By the way, last year we attended our very first Treasury event, Eurofinance International Management Conference in Barcelona. Not only have we networked, met, discussed, brainstormed with amazing treasurers and actors in the space, we have also been able to attend thought-provoking panel discussions on the latest trends, topics, and challenges in corporate treasury. With more than 8 stages and 150 speakers, you can customize the agenda to fit your priorities. My personal favorite, the fintech space, where you can see new actors in the space explaining their solution and how they are disrupting the world of treasury. This year, we've partnered with Eurofinance to make it easier for everybody to attend the Eurofinance International Management Conference from October 2nd to October 4th in Copenhagen. And we even have a 10% dedicated discount code. Just type CT101/10, CT101/10 at checkout to unlock the discount at eurofinance.com/international. And that's it, guys. Séverine, let's start at the beginning. What does it take to actually build a treasury function from scratch?
Well, first of all, you need to understand the needs of the business. So you need to understand what is their maturity level. That was quickly done, very low. Then you have to understand where you can unlock value, right? Which areas will you be able to bring the most value to your transformation so that your first steps fuel returns that will let you invest for the following steps. So really understand very well the people, reach out to the people, have a vision on where you want to go on the end state, share your vision, take the time to share it at the top level and down the organization and laterally with other functions so that everybody is aligned on where you want to go. Where you want to go is very clear from a treasurer, right? We know what bliss looks like, right? So you explain where you want to go. You explain what is the scope of treasury. Are you going to cover operational payments or only really corporate treasury, right? What is the scope of your treasury organization? So understand what is going to be managed by treasury, not managed by treasury, and then really have deep conversation with the people, understand what would they like to be improved, because many of them, they will be suffering in silence often, right? For many years of things that they wish they had more guidance on this, they wish they had more support on this, or they're not happy with their bank. They can't manage to do that because they don't get the support from another function, right? So understand what are the pain points from their point of view, and then align them with where you want to go, where you know value will be unlocked. And with this, you can already initiate the machine. Then it's how do you do it, right? How do you do it? You have always to move hand in hand from a technology standpoint,
right?
Governance standpoint, ultra important. Otherwise, whatever you build remains somewhere in the cloud and is not really ingrained in the company.
Mm-hmm.
People, ultra important. You need to bring them along with you, raise their skills level as the maturity goes up. Make sure you can secure the good elements that you keep those people. Carve those people out from other finance function because you have designed what treasury is not, right? So you should try to have those people separated so that you can have a much better focus on their development. And then, of course, all your partnership from a technology, banking, fintech, peers, right? Have that whole ecosystem with you.
Love that. There are two things that I want to follow up on in here, Séverine. The first thing is, and that's one of the first things you mentioned, it's not actually just transforming the function. It's also transforming the way people see treasury within and outside of treasury. How do you handle both? Because there is, for having gone through some of that, there is head of work of hey, okay, this is the vision. This is how we want to get there. Those are the first steps that we need to take in order to get there. All whilst, by the way, this is treasury. This is what we do. Hey, how do you make sure that all this falls into place properly and that you do not lose pieces along the way, outside and within treasury?
So it's very difficult, honestly, because you need to bring, to some extent, the other functions also up on their maturity ladder, right?
Right.
They have their own roadmap, for sure. But you need to put yourself into their roadmap so that they understand that you need their support or you need their alignment. And how can you find those touch points? So it's a matter of being very sensitive at understanding their own roadmap. What are they also trying to achieve? How can we help them? Because in many cases, you can have mutual interest. And then focus on those points first, right? And have that alignment in terms of their resource capabilities, in terms of, on your side, what is going to unlock value. You want to do it the soonest, the big things that are going to unlock the most value. What are your dependencies? Some things you can do on your own and you don't need the other function. Some things you can't do without their support, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to constantly revisit that. What are the big projects in the company? What are they doing? Right? For instance, in Latin America, they were busy centralizing to handle any projects you want them to do. But yet that they are still flexible enough to adapt what they are developing, to take into account your elements of governance, processes, etc. So it's really doing this co-working with the various functions. It can take time, but it's really building that trust. And then once you are on the move, then, it just builds on and on and on and becomes easier. It's also building credibility that what you say you do, but what you do you say as well, right? You don't do things on your own, on your side, without exchanging with people. It's ultra important. And for me, all this change management and cooperation is probably what drains the biggest energy. And that's the thing that I don't want to delegate, or I delegate very little, which is probably opposite to many companies will do, right? They will say, this who will take this small clerk who will do the change management. No. To me, it's very important that it's being done and that you take as much attention to people all the way in the chain. Right? I'm not thinking about, hierarchy, whatever. For me, this is not a very important element to me because we need everybody to be embarked on and to be successful. So you need to spend time with people. If you can go and meet them face to face, it's always better than on a video. If you can do a video, it's better than a call. A call is better than a mail. And sometimes you have to align these, right? And do different, and not just drop it on them and leave, but constantly give them an update, realign, adjust your timeline when it makes sense, right? Understand that people, in principle, they want the best for the company, right? We should not doubt about that, right? Even if sometimes you feel some frustration, it's because people want the best for the company, right? So give them the benefit of the doubt always, but be persistent, regular, and have a very thorough project management process where you don't lose track of the things that stay pending, right? And that's where the cooperation with Pricewaterhouse has been extremely helpful because they have this consistent approach and they'll remind us of things that we said, we can do that in 6 weeks. Well, boom, 6 weeks plus 1 day, here we are, right? So it's just, we can be patient, but we never lose track. And inside the Treasury organization, it's a matter to give pride to people, to what they are doing. It's a matter really training them, taking the time, that they understand where we are going to, why, what will be in it for them, what is required from them, how that can help them having more resource in terms of system, more resource for their people, for the organization, how they can better serve their business, right? The treasury people in the regions, they are much closer to the business than we can be in the head office. And they want to have that role, right? So how can we empower them so that they feel that thanks to what we are doing, they will be better partners for their business? It's a big change of mindset, depending on what is the starting point. But in many cases, you can have very good surprises of people who say, finally, I was waiting for this for years, right? And then they are your advocates with other local people. Or you do the transformation with a certain affiliates, and then they become your advocate for the other regions, the other affiliates. So it gives positive mindset, right? Where over time you are building your credibility, you're building your trust, and people understand that, yes, what you do has benefits for the central hub, but they have automation, they have saving costs, they have better people, they have, so you need to initiate this machine. But of course, the beginning is the most difficult because people think, oh yeah, some told me, right? You arrived and you told us, this is my vision, that's what I want to do. And we were thinking, yeah.
Sure,
Good luck,
sure
we'll see, right? And the same people, 2 years later, they go and say to my boss, initially, we never thought she would do it. How is it she can do it? And our other projects are not moving as nicely, right? So it's building that trust, but very important, we never listen enough, right? We have to listen. We have to listen, understand why do people have concerns? Why don't they do things? Reassure people as well, right? You need to reassure them that we will be there to support them in the transformation, in the change, whether in trying to minimize the impact on them, trying to find that they are impacted at the times where it's easier for them, not at month's end or this kind of concerns, and that we will be there later on, train them, and on the longer term to support them in the roadmap. If you do that, there is no reason that people don't want to follow, right? Ultimately, they want to add value. They want to be proud of their function. So it's and trying to share best practices between regions so that they see that, you've done it there and they seem to be happy. It seems to be worth doing the effort, right? And for some, the effort is heavier than for others, depending where they come from. But yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. To those starting points that you mentioned, Séverine, what are because and you just walk us through it, right? There is a ton of things to do. It's a multi-year project at least. So what are kind of the key elements of a treasury transformation journey? And by that, what are the big bang changes that, you need to initiate at the start because they will have a global impact versus the things that, can happen only after a few months, instead of a few years? How do you map that out? And in your case, what have been those big bang changes that had a global impact?
It's a very good question. Indeed, you cannot do it all at once, and it's not even desirable because you need the organization to be able to absorb the changes over time. Now, how do you select what you do at once and what you do over time? It depends of technicity, right? If you do a treasury management system, you can have economies of scale by doing it once globally. You set up the banks, you set up entities, all your master data. It makes a lot more sense to do once for the whole world than I'll do Europe and then that doesn't make sense. You do cash visibility, you set up a project, you are systematic, you go and get cash visibility reporting globally. Now you have some elements where to be able to develop them, you need some prerequisites, or you need to have you have many touch points with other elements in the organization. So you need to have a certain list of conditions from other functions to be able to kick that out. So that's a bit the criteria. And then, of course, you try to do the things that will have the biggest impact to fuel your transformation so that you have an initial cost, but then you bring value, and basically the gains of the first steps are paying for the further investments, so that it's a very healthy model instead of investing without knowing when you will start to have your return on your cash. So in our case, what did we do big bang? It was the connectivity to SWIFT, having the first set that up. The Treasury Management System. So big bang means we did it in a year, which was really heavy when you don't come from a Treasury Management System, right? It was actually the first global finance application in the company. We didn't even have a unique entity code in the company, right? We didn't have any conventions on how do you do code. So the cash visibility, you want to know who are we banking with, where is our cash. When I joined, it was completely, we were missing that information. And then you have a number of elements where you can do it relatively fast in the central treasury, in-house bank, let's say, but the rollout takes more time. So, for instance, a selection of the banks, we started with the central treasury, but then you have to do your RFPs and select, and you can do it in bulk, but you cannot do 40 countries at once. That's a bit, I think banks would kill us if we come with 40 countries RFP. They already sometimes complain. And then you need to, be able to absorb the implementation behind. So banking redesign, you do it by certain pool that correspond to certain priorities. Then when you do that, you can do the connectivity behind. So this is more rollout system. Then in terms of governance, you also have some things where you can do it straight away. If it's a new policy, for instance, on counterparty risk, we didn't have any counterparty risk policy. Well, that can be a big bang because it's quite easy to check the compliance. It's quite easy to resolve as well. So this you can do in a big bang. But some more complex policies, you need more time to roll them out because you may not have access to data or access to systems, or you will need to educate people a lot more. So those will take more time. Transfer pricing for intercompany transactions. We developed a policy with tax. Well, this policy, we can relatively quickly implement it for the in-house bank. But then when you have to revisit existing contracts between any two affiliates or local cash pools, etc., you have to work with tax. That takes more time to implement, right? A liquidity structure. You cannot do a big bang. It's not something that you change in 2 days. Yes, you can have an overlay liquidity cash pool. And when I say big bang, right, we're talking a few months, of course. Huh? But then having all this connectivity, you have a lot of other touch points. So it's really, you dream that you can do it all in a year. It's impossible, right? And it's very frustrating because after a year, you look back and you know where you want to go. You've done a few things, but in fact, you know so well what you still have to do that is very frustrating because you have the impression that, you know, you want to be in 2, 3, 5 years time and see how it's going to be. But it takes time.
100%. And so speaking of policy and governance then, how do you, and I'm not sure of my choice of word here, but you'll correct me if needed. How do you enforce it? Because how do you make people go from, let's say, not having a lot of guidance, right? Maybe sometimes some guidelines and potentially not even following them like strictly by the rules to like, hey guys, it's not going to happen overnight, but as of now, this is the counterparty risk management policy. This is the transfer pricing policy. This is how we're going to do this. In that type of exposure, we need to do that. In that type of region, we need to do this. Like, how do you go, because we hear in your speech that you're very much people-focused. How do you go from, we don't have a very solid guideline around all things treasury, to, guys, there is this policy that now we are going to apply by the books. How do you manage that?
Well, you see, initially, what I had in mind was, I will join as Global Head of Treasury. I will ask what the Treasury policy is in place, and I will tweak it or expand it or improve it. What I found was a very skinny Treasury policy with lots of words like in principle, if possible, we try. I mean, kind of the wording that I would not expect in a policy. Some elements were in there that were more strategic and not necessarily followed. So I said, we are so far away. And there was no control on those policies. They were there somewhere on the website. Some elements were more or less implemented, but even Treasury people were not necessarily referring to the Treasury policy as a guiding light. So I thought if I do that jump, yes, I may have a very nice Treasury policy on my website, but I will not necessarily be better in terms of really compliance. So the way we did it was in several steps. First, I've been thinking of my scope of what Treasury is, my operating model, and that you can feel relatively quickly, right? What you think has to be owned centrally, what needs to be owned regionally, what needs to be owned by the local affiliates, and what are the touch points with staff or with controllership or finance in more general. So I had this operating model, which I've publicized and discussed with the treasurer and the CFOs, because of course what is not treasury becomes finance, and of course some piece of finance go to treasury, so they lose that control, right? So first I had that main vision shared and discussed with the regions, and that went relatively smooth. Then we implemented our treasury management system, our bank account management tool, and the first pilot of the payment hub. So we had our 3 core treasury systems whereby we had processes and we've had workflows that were attached to them. So we're getting closer, right, to the treasury policy because we are deciding who's doing what, who are the rights, as we are implementing those systems, we are developing this governance. And then as we are doing that, we are thinking on how can we check that this is in force. So either it's embedded controls via the system, it's the easiest. They can't, if they want to do it, they are not able to do it. Or we set up so for instance, for counterparty risk, we set up some reports where we can check the compliance. So with a full set of reports and a full set of dashboards, then you start to have something that really takes life, where people, you can tell them, you see this policy, this line number 12, it corresponds to this report. And that's what I want to see in the report, or that's I don't want to see in this report. Right? So it becomes very concrete for people. Once you've done that, then you can really draft more detailed treasury policies. But in fact, most of it is already implemented, right? You're tweaking here and there. You're putting maybe names or limit of amounts, but the core of it is already implemented, right? And with that, you go again, talk to the people. Do you have concerns? Do you think you can be compliant? Let's work together. This piece, I think you're not compliant. How can we help you? Right? And so we do it by layer, like peeling an onion, but you go layer by layer so that you don't take them by surprise. They understand where you're going to. And step by step, you say, okay, I see that this element that you're doing, we need to work on it because it's not in line to where we are going to be. It's not in line with the policy I will get approved in 6 months or 9 months from now. So let's work together. What are the obstacles? Is it that you don't have the systems? Is it that you don't have the people? Is it that you lack training, that you don't have access to data? And then we can have that. Now, even the treasury policies, we have a core treasury policy, which once it's approved, it's law, right? Policy is like law inside the company. And we have treasury guidelines to be treasury policies where we can be a little bit more aggressive, anticipating on other systems that we know we will implement on our roadmap later on, right? So it's every time to make sure that we bring the people to the highest maturity level of where they can be, because everybody needs to comply to the treasury policies and it will cover a big piece of what we want to do. And then you have some people that are able to go further and have access to the data or have the knowledge or where it's relevant for them. And those ones, because they are the treasury guidelines, well, they can go to the highest level of maturity, knowing exactly how they have to do and where they have to go, right? You don't leave them alone or you don't say, oh, this for now I don't look. No, you look at it as well, right? The thing is, once you can bring everybody aligned with the treasury guidelines, poof, it becomes policy. So it needs to be, it's a living document where you work with the people to help them to get better, but you never take them by surprise.
Right. So something I would love to get your take on, Séverine, is as an employee, right? So as a treasury member or new Treasury member, because I'm coming from the finance department, we find out that 90% of my tasks are actually Treasury related. We have not just put the right umbrella over it. But so as an employee, how do I help my group treasurer make this transformation a success? Because I guess what a lot of people will think listening to us is also, hey, how do I make sure this advances my career? Or I make sure that I add strategic value and I'm not just being taken from one department to another, or just kind of not being victim of that transformation, but going through this transformation without having real ownership. How do I, as an employee, do that?
Well, first, there is this element of the transformation. I wish that all the people in Treasury could report to me directly, of course, with an org chart. It's not the case, right? They report to the finance people. So my work is to work with the boss of the regional treasurer and have them understand where we're going to, have them understand the value we bring not only to the Treasury organization, but to the wider finance community, and have them understand the benefits of this carve-out of Treasury people out of the rest of the finance operations, right? Treasury people should not be the one doing day-to-day operational payments, right? They should not be the one checking credit application or bank account reconciliation. Or it's much better if they are segregated from a control perspective, skills, etc. And then you work with those people to make sure that those people have the right trainings they are entitled to, that they are paid fairly, that they can get development. You try to give them the benefit of the transformation when we do a transformation in a region or a country, or if there is any public reward to get from it, you make sure they get more than their fair share of this, right? Because without them, you couldn't do anything, right? So really that people see that. You give them that pride and enthusiasm about what Treasury is about. You make sure that they're building their CV, that they're building their capabilities. And then it's up to us to know that despite this, they will want to stay with us, right? It's both sides, but make sure that you have a development plan for each of them, and that they have this, that they see that they are getting better, that is good for them because they are learning, right? And trying to build that community larger than what they have just in their region or in their country, that they feel that they belong to a wider Treasury community, that if they are faced with a problem, in Central, they have a center of excellence where we can think together and design solutions, right? So I think it's not easy because you come from far away where people are doing just tasks. They're being done just what they were asked to do. And then you ask them not to do tasks, but to play a role. It's much different, right?
So I love that. That's the vision of the group treasurer, what you need to do for your employees as a group treasurer when you want to bring them along in the transformation journey. But I guess, and if I had to rephrase a bit the question, let's say you hire me, Séverine, at the beginning of your transformational journey. What do I need to do to make sure that you get the value from me and I really help you for this transformation journey? What needs to be true in the things I do, in the way I approach things, for you to be like, yeah, he played a key role in the transformation, and then you put in place this reward system and so on and so forth.
So first you have to understand the vision, and you even have to question the vision. If you think that for some reasons this is not the right vision for your region, you should not hesitate to challenge it and raise your voice, right? I think that's extremely important. You should think, what would I do to improve this area? What would I do? If I would be in the seat of the treasurer, what would be my ideas, right? And share those up the line to your manager, to your manager of your manager. Make sure that your concerns, your ideas are shared. That's extremely important. Then in the way you work on a day-to-day basis, you always have to prioritize the tasks that are adding value to the organization, right? Make sure that there are things that look very, very tidy, very boring to do, but they are a little piece of the transformation, right? Always prioritize those tasks. And I'm not saying only do what is visible or political, not at all, right? It can be something that looks very mundane, but it is a little break of the bigger picture. And so this you should really prioritize. Try to be in time, maybe even ahead of the process. See how when you are asked questions, How can you be as precise as possible? Can you take in charge to speak to other stakeholders around you in the other functions at your level, right? Share the view with your colleagues in Treasury and outside Treasury. Explain to them what nice project you are working on. What are you trying to achieve? What vision is going to be? How it can help the other regions. So really be part of this. Be an advocate, be an actor, and not just someone passive who obey to what is being asked, right? Really participate actively and then educate yourself because, of course, we will raise up the maturity ladder. So get acquainted with the Treasury organization in your country. Read articles about the topics. Try to get some external training. Question your banks. Leverage the wealth of knowledge that your banks have. If you have some questions about anything around in finance, your banks are more than willing to shoot you their best specialist about it. So just make sure you are growing yourself. It will help the company to grow.
Wow. I love the challenge, even the vision. That's really, really good. And it's like, as you said, I think the people within the regions know what the business needs or have a good idea of what the business needs within those regions. And like making sure the feedback goes up is super, super important. Love that. Something you mentioned, Séverine, when we talked before this recording is the fact that you see a treasury management system as a living thing. Can you share a bit your perspective on this and what you mean by that exactly?
Well, first, the treasury management system is a record of what is being done in terms of treasury in the company, right? That's level 0. Then it brings you the cash visibility, it brings you what FX transactions are done, what are we doing with the cash, etc. But then it's also a tool, have reports, have processes, have governance, and it should really end up by letting people in the regions get rid of all their Excels that they are working on with. It's not that we want them to put certain data in the treasury management system and on the side they still manage their treasury in Excel, right? They should, over time, be able to get rid of one. It takes time for them to get confidence, right? But time by time, they should understand this Excel spreadsheet that I'm used. How can I get this information out of the treasury management system, right? And then you have and over time, they should have very little Excel that they use that only consolidate information that is not in the treasury management system and that you cannot import. Of course, all the connectivity is extremely important, right? So the trading platform, whether for money market funds, for FX, etc., you have those trading platforms, they feed the TMS will feed the payment system, the TMS will feed the accounting system. So it takes time to build all those interfaces. You have the value that get connected to the payment system. You have Bloomberg or Reuters, the trades platform. So you can have, of course, platforms to manage your bank fees. So all this ecosystem that you are building, it takes some time. As you are climbing the maturity ladder, as you are rolling out from one entity to another region, your TMS is a living system that becomes ever more customized, ever more user-friendly, and ever more useful, not only for the central treasury to capture data, but for every people working in treasury to do their work in a very efficient manner, in a straight-through reconciliation, and with a lot more robustness in terms of audit, segregation of duties. And so it's also a relief for the people that they're not afraid of doing a typo in Excel that could have huge risk for the company and thus for themselves too, right? If you have a TMS that is well done, well, they have that comfort that you always have at least 4 eyes, that you have these controls. It's also something that is giving comfort to the people that, yes, if they do a mistake one day, it will be caught up by the process, by the system, by their co-workers. Not everything lies on their shoulders, not to make a typo in a big Excel spreadsheet.
I think everybody can relate to those massive Excel spreadsheets that they have to populate. I would like to get a bit tactical on something, Séverine. So, since the beginning, you mentioned how important it is to, nurture your people, make sure that you help them grow and that you bring them along with the transformation, right? How do you actually advocate for the Treasury Department, and the Treasury transformation with the broader company? And here, I'd like us to really get tactical on, what are the strategies that you use personally to demonstrate that value, to demonstrate that vision, to explain it, to bring along people? Is it sitting down one-to-one with, the heads of departments? Is it making sure that you're showing up every now and then to certain meetings. Like, how did you do that at Aliaxis, especially in the first few months, few years, where it was critical to make sure that everybody understood what you were doing here? How did you do that?
Well, you have different elements. First, as I said, is connecting with the various functions, understanding their roadmap, understanding how can our roadmap get connected to their roadmap, right? And over time, you are bringing value to them as well, right? So that's one element. Second, once you complete very good projects, let's see, could it be relevant? Is it good enough? Do you think it's really transformative that you can seek an external award, right? Which demonstrates that independent people, unrelated to your organization, find that you've done a good job. Well, it helps the internal people to also say, oh wow, they got an external award. Yeah, there must be something in what they've done, right? And it also, of course, gives pride back to the people who worked on the project and on your management who's been investing and supporting your vision, right? So it's both ways. Then, yeah, what else? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So do you typically, because I'm thinking, do you typically sit down with, so I'm thinking of the importance of tax and legal when it comes to treasury, right? One could imagine that when you have for years, if not decades, a treasury department that is not playing a proactive role in how to, bring that value to the business, they have not had many interactions with legal and tax, for instance. When you bring on the treasury transformation journey, well, not only will you need them for the treasury transformation, but also afterwards, like, hey, those are now the clear guidelines. We need your buy-in on this, and that, and we need your support on this, and that. So is it showing up like in a meeting with them every now and then? Is it, participating in certain steering committees or like even board committees, whatever it is? Like, how do you tactically, meaning in the facts, do that?
Well, I regularly have meetings with those functions where I prioritize the work where we need their support, because we send them along. We have this, we send emails. Can you do that? We need that. Regularly, as we talk to them and say, this is the most urgent for now. And then this is the most urgent. And we reshuffle the priority list constantly, right? Is it going as fast as we wish? Never. Let's be clear. But it's important. Then it's also trying to give them some additional information. For instance, for tax, we may speak to peers and have them speak to the tax people and say, look, others are doing it that way, right? So we can understand your concerns, but what we're trying to do is not cowboy-like, right? It's best practice. So trying to educate them as well on the treasury aspects, which may not be their main area of interest and concern, and it's only a small portion of what they are in charge. For legal, it's also educating them on the best practice and say, okay, this sort of document, this clause, you will always have it, right? That's the essence. We won't get around. And sometimes say, okay, I'm taking on me that I sign, that I'm aware that there is this risk, but I'm willing to do it, right? At the end, legal, they need to be supporting the business, right? If you're not doing anything crazy. But on the other hand, if there are things that they highlight and you realize that there is a real risk, you need to be the one pushing with your banks and saying, this, I won't sign on it. This, I won't sign off. This is too risky for us for this. This is unfair. You need to move, right? So really finding the right fine tune on which side do you need to escalate and push so that things get moving. But you need to play the game. You need to follow the process and be cooperative. And it can be really long. The iterative process can be very frustrating, very long. And then you come to a point where all things that could be cleared following the regular process are cleared. And then you come to a few elements. And there you need to find, and potentially you need to involve your CFO to make that decision and sit by your side or not, right? It's not easy because it's also building knowledge and skills in those teams. But if you invest and do things by the rule and respect their point of view, right? We need to respect that legal, they are there to protect the company, right? They are not there to put hurdles on us. Some contracts, I had a contract which took 19 months to negotiate, which to me was a very basic contract, 19 months. It's ultra long, right? I'm sure they mean it well, right? I'm sure they mean it well. So ultimately we got there, but you need also to understand that they have their own priority, which they may be taken by deals or transactions, or will always prevail on transformation. It's very unfair and you hate it, but it's the reality. And for ourselves as well, by the way, right? We sometimes, some periods we are working on a deal and we don't have the time to do what we should be doing for the transformation. But we try to minimize those times to always have our transformation quite high on our agenda, otherwise nothing happens. But you have always this balance between what they need to do to support new acquisitions, separations, maybe they have a tax audit somewhere, maybe they have new compliance rules, you can have some disruptive element in those functions, and you need to understand that they don't have just you in their lives. It's not easy, but ultimately, and that's all, you manage to do it. And that's why doing a transformation at a relatively accelerated pace and having several workflows at one time can help. Because if you're stuck on one workflow, you can still move on another one. If you're very iterative and you say, I'd first do my TMS and then I will see next what I see, and you're stuck for something in your TMS, let's say, well, you're stuck, right? But if you have 3, 4, 5 workflows at the same time, you always have some where you can still move on without having that reliance or being reliant on another function that has more time, right? So if you have enough on your plate, like the little Chinese with their little sticks and plates, right? You don't want a plate to fall, but you have to make sure you don't have just 2 plates, because then not a lot will be achieved. So by having several workflows at one time, you make sure that at least some projects are moving on. And you also it's a way also to manage your frustration.
Which can be very important on a multi-year project. And because I think a lot of people will be interested in that. I mean, we've talked to hundreds of treasurers by now, and one of the main things that pops up is, hey, Treasury is still very siloed within companies, right? Not everybody knows what we do. It's not really recognized. Plus, we work within ourselves. So what's the incentive that you give to the departments, or heads of departments, to make sure that they work along with you? What I mean by that is, I have a pretty good idea of what you need to do to convince your CFO, right? You need to show the money. You need to go there and say, hey, bottom line, this is what's going to bring us. And then you can line up all the qualitative aspects as well. I suspect with legal, for instance, it's not as simple. Not that it's simple, but it's not as straightforward. It's not like, hey, this is going to allow us to make that much money. I guess there are some incentives and like moving pieces that you can play with to be like, hey, if you help us on this, this is what's in it for you. How do you do that?
Legal, at the end, it's a risk reduction function, right? So yes, you have projects where the bottom line cash is what you're looking for, but stronger governance, reduction of risk, this speaks to legal, for instance, right? So you always have some common touch points. If you think of the wider organization, finance organization, automation is something that they will be looking at. Lower fees, easier access to cash, less risk of fraud. You have always a lot of elements. You can also play the catalyst. For instance, what I've arranged is some fintechs that are working on bank account reconciliation. They don't have that in the finance function. It's definitely not a treasury responsibility, but you can be the catalyst and show them new ways of working, opportunities of transformation on their own processes and help them along, right? Or if I speak of IT, I leveraged a very big bank, not to name them City, to help us organize a workshop on data. They've done a fantastic job, again, leveraging all the brain power you have with banks, and have that workshop with IT to say, okay, food for your thoughts, right? Here is a large multinational is doing it. And when as a customer, I can see there is value. So it's trying to help them on solving their problems. And solving their problems will often help us to do our job better, right? I don't think in an organization we should be looking at various functions in silos. You always have bridges between the functions where one needs another. When one is moving up on the maturity ladder, it will help another function to move up on the maturity ladder. You have the business and you have the finance organization. The business needs finance to have guidance of what they need to improve, and we need the business to support our transformation. So these are just examples of how you can do that.
Absolutely love that. Séverine, is there anything you'd add to our conversation that I maybe didn't touch upon, but you think is important to bring up?
Not particularly. I think it's maybe if people are interested on a very practical case, at Eurofinance, we will present what we have achieved in our LATAM region. So we have done a selection of our banks over there for 10 countries. We re-challenged our initial opinion of having one bank per country because that was not the best solution for the region. We have implemented those new banks with lots of related systems, including the payment hub. We have revisited all the funding. Thanks to this, we could reduce FX exposure, which was a lot self-inflicted because they didn't have enough funding in certain countries and then borrowing from another one, creating FX exposure. We have materially improved all the master data in the Ps. We have hundreds of thousands of fields that have been reviewed. We've achieved a high level of automation. I think it's a very nice project. We involved 62 people that were at least busy on a weekly basis on this project, whether from central treasury, local treasury, the various banks, the advisors. So I'm very happy to discuss this at the next Eurofinance conference. So it's how do you do it in practice? It was extremely challenging, but we're very proud of what we've achieved, and we were lucky to have it recognized by an Adam Smith Award as Best Treasury Solution in LATAM last June.
Absolutely. October 2nd from 4 p.m. to 4:40 p.m. Go and check out the panel discussion with Séverine and her presentation. It will be an absolute blast. Séverine, thank you so much for coming on Corporate Treasury 101.
My pleasure, Guillaume.